From telling a grandchild to keep a secret, to comparing them to their siblings or dismissing their emotions, some seemingly harmless phrases can do more harm than most grandparents realize. Here are 5 things grandparents should stop saying and what to say instead. Picture this. Grandma sneaks a second slice of cake to her granddaughter and whispers, "Don't tell Mom." Grandpa lets the kids stay up 2 hours past bedtime and leans in with a grin. "This is just between us." It feels like love. It feels like the magic only grandparents can offer. And in the moment the child lights up, they feel special, chosen, like they're part of a private club that only the 2 of them belong to. But here's what's actually happening underneath that warm feeling. Anytime you're encouraging your grandkids to keep something from their parents, it can be harmful, according to Atlanta clinical psychologist Zainab Delawala. It undercuts parental authority, which can have long-standing consequences, she said. That's the first problem. The parent is the child's anchor, their source of rules, safety, and trust. The moment a grandparent coaches a child to hide something from that anchor, they've introduced a crack in the foundation. They've taught the child that some things are okay to keep from mom and dad, that certain secrets are fine, that there are situations where going around a parent is not just acceptable, it's fun. And children don't have the cognitive tools yet to sort out which secrets are fun and harmless versus which ones cross a line. Their brains don't work that way. Once you've handed them the framework of some things we don't tell your parents, that framework doesn't stay limited to birthday surprises and extra cookies. It generalizes. It models for kids that they might find themselves in situations where it's in their best interest not to tell their parents. This can be especially dangerous if a child is being groomed by a predator or feels bad about themselves for getting bullied. That's not a small thing. That is one of the most important pieces of safety infrastructure a child has: the automatic reflex to tell a trusted adult when something feels wrong. And the little secret habit, played out repeatedly at grandma's house, chips away at that reflex over time. The child learns that keeping quiet is how you hold on to love. That loyalty sometimes means silence. That telling creates problems. Those lessons don't stay at grandma's house. They travel everywhere with that kid. Now, none of this means grandparents can't have fun. The magic of the grandparent relationship is real, and it matters. The cookie, the late bedtime, the special privilege, those things are wonderful when they're done openly, or at least when they don't require a child to lie to their parents. The issue isn't the indulgence, it's the secrecy around it. Grandparents can find other ways of doting on their grandchildren without crossing the boundaries their parents have put in place. Delawala said, "So what do you say instead? You never want to put your grandchildren in the position of keeping secrets from their parents. Instead say, 'We need to check this out with your mom and dad first.' Or, if you want to give that second cookie anyway, just do it openly. Own it. Laugh about it with the parents. Let the child see that grown-ups handle things above the table, not under it. Let that be the lesson. And if there's a surprise being planned, a birthday gift, a special trip, you can frame it differently. Let's keep Grandpa's birthday present a surprise until Saturday. Is not the same as don't tell your parents. One is a fun countdown with a defined end point. The other is a rule without a reason. Children know the difference between the two, even if they can't articulate it. The goal isn't to be a rule enforcer. Children should always be able to confide in their parents, and grandparents can encourage this. The strongest grandparent-grandchild relationships are built on love that's transparent. Love that the whole family can see and celebrate. When a grandchild grows up knowing that their grandparent always had their parents' trust, that grandparent becomes a pillar, not a loophole. That's the version of grandma and grandpa worth being. This one is harder, because it comes from the purest place imaginable. You haven't seen your grandchild in 2 months. You walk through the door, and your heart swells. You open your arms and you say it. Come give grandpa a hug, or give grandma a kiss. And half the time, the child comes running and everything is exactly as it should be. But the other half of the time, more than grandparents tend to notice, something different happens. The child hesitates, stiffens, looks away, shuffles reluctantly toward you because every adult in the room is watching, waiting. And the social pressure is enormous. and grandparents, feeling that hesitation, sometimes push harder. "Come on, just one hug. Don't be shy. You know you love Grandma." And then the child complies. Not because they wanted to, but because refusing felt worse. As a grandparent, it's natural to want to connect with your grandchildren in this way, especially when you're so excited to see them. However, many kids may not feel comfortable giving hugs and kisses on demand, and it's important for the adults in their lives to respect this. Here's where the psychology gets important. This kind of phrase can also unintentionally take away a child's right to autonomy and pressure them to abandon and second-guess their body boundaries. According to therapist Dorn, this can send confusing messages about consent. That phrase, confusing messages about consent, is the one to sit with. Because what a child learns when they're repeatedly pressured to give physical affection they didn't initiate is that their body isn't entirely theirs. When an adult wants something from it, that saying no to someone who loves them isn't allowed. That love comes with an obligation to be touched. Those are lessons that have consequences far beyond the living room. Touching a grandchild's body in any way without their consent, even in a playful way, violates bodily autonomy and can make kids and teens feel extremely uncomfortable, unsafe, and insecure about their bodies. Now, and this is worth saying clearly, this doesn't mean grandparents can't be warm, physical, affectionate people. It doesn't mean hugs are off the table. It means the demand for physical affection is what creates the problem, the ask versus the command. The invitation versus the expectation. Those are two completely different things, and children feel the difference. In order to respect your grandkids' boundaries, you could instead phrase this as a question: "I'd love to give you a hug. Is that okay?" And if they say no, accept their answer and move on. That's it. That's the whole shift. Ask, don't demand. And when the child says yes freely, when they run into your arms because they chose to, that hug means something different. That hug is real. It's not compliance dressed up as affection. It's genuine connection. Let the grandchild come to you. This is the most counterintuitive thing for many grandparents because it feels like pulling back, like being cold. But children are drawn toward safety, and when they know that their grandparent will never pressure them, that they're free to choose when and how they show affection, they tend to show more of it, not less. They initiate the hugs. They climb into your lap on their own terms. They want to be near you because near you feels safe. The grandparents who hold their arms open and wait rather than reaching out and pulling are the ones grandchildren run to. That's the relationship worth building. This is the phrase most grandparents don't even hear themselves saying anymore. It's so automatic, so ingrained. A child starts crying about something small, something that seems disproportionate, and the words are out before the thought is even finished. Stop crying. You're fine. Big boys don't cry. Don't be such a baby. If you heard some version of these phrases growing up, you probably absorbed a lesson that felt like practical wisdom at the time. Emotions are inconvenient. Expressing them is weakness, and the fastest way to earn approval is to swallow whatever you're feeling and move on. The adults who said these things weren't usually being cruel. Most of them genuinely believed they were preparing you for a world that wouldn't care about your feelings. They believed they were toughening the child up, teaching resilience, preparing them for hardship. And that belief is understandable. It comes from a generation that survived real hardship and drew real lessons from it. But the research says something different about what actually happens to children who grow up hearing those words over and over. Recalled parental emotional invalidation is found to be associated with psychopathological symptoms in adulthood. It has also been linked to anxiety, depressive, borderline, and schizotypal personality symptoms. That's clinical language for something deeply human. What those studies are describing is the adult in a therapist's office who can't explain why they feel numb. The grown man who never cries at funerals and doesn't understand why. The woman who pushes through every crisis without asking for help and then collapses without warning. These aren't failures of character. They're the result of an emotional education. That said, your feelings are inconvenient, so disappear them. And children who hear that from the adults they love, grandparents especially, absorb it deeply. When a child expresses emotion and a grandparent responds with dismissal, it teaches the child that their feelings are wrong or excessive. Child psychologists emphasize that emotional validation is crucial for healthy development. Think about what it means to be validated. It doesn't mean agreeing that the situation warrants tears. It doesn't mean giving the child whatever they're crying about. It just means acknowledging that the feeling is real, that you see them, that being upset is allowed, that it doesn't need to be fixed or shut down, just witnessed. As one practitioner with additional training in emotionally focused therapy put it, emotional suppression in childhood creates relationship problems in adulthood. The child who was always told not to cry becomes the teenager who bottles everything, who acts out sideways because they have no direct language for what they're feeling, who struggles with friendships and romantic relationships because connecting emotionally requires a skill they were never allowed to develop. The grandparent who said stop crying every time a tear appeared didn't create a tough kid. They created a disconnected one. So what do you say instead? Simply say, it's okay to feel sad. Everyone cries sometimes. Or offer comfort without commentary on the appropriateness of their emotional expression. That's it. You don't have to turn into a therapist. You don't have to sit cross-legged on the floor and do breathing exercises. You just have to not dismiss the feeling. You can say, I see you're really upset. Come sit with me. You can say, that sounds really hard. You can say nothing and just put an arm around them and let them feel what they feel until it passes. Because it always passes. Feelings are not permanent. But the lessons children learn about feelings, those stick. Telling your grandkids not to cry or calling them a crybaby can invalidate their feelings and make them feel ashamed for expressing their emotions. Instead, try saying it's okay to feel sad. Let's talk about what's bothering you. The grandparent who holds the space for a child's tears, who doesn't rush to stop them, fix them, or shame them, becomes the safest person in that child's life. And that safety? That's the foundation of a relationship that lasts a lifetime. Of all 5 phrases on this list, this one might do the most visible, traceable damage. Because unlike the others, which work quietly, beneath the surface, this one lands like a punch. The child hears it clearly. They know exactly what it means. And if you watch their face in the moment the words are said, you can see it register. Why can't you be more like your sister? Translation: your sister is better than you. That's the message. That's what the child hears every single time, regardless of what the grandparent meant. And frequent comparisons like, why can't you be more like your brother? Increase sibling rivalry. But that's almost the smaller consequence. The bigger one is what it does to the child being compared, the one who comes up short. Sibling rivalry can significantly impact the emotional development of children involved. It often leads to a range of emotions, such as anger, jealousy, resentment, and insecurity. These intense emotions can negatively affect a child's self-esteem and overall emotional well-being. And here's what's insidious about comparisons from grandparents specifically. Parents make mistakes in the heat of frustration. Children know that. They expect imperfection from their parents. But grandparents carry a different kind of authority. They're older, more removed from the daily chaos, and children often view them as wise. So when grandma says your brother never had this problem, it doesn't land as frustration, it lands as verdict. The child doesn't think, grandma's just tired today. They think, grandma has seen a lot of kids, and she thinks I'm the harder one. And that verdict can stick. These labels, even positive ones, limit children's sense of themselves and create anxiety about maintaining the label or resentment about not having one. When you tell one grandchild they're the good one, you're implicitly telling their siblings they're not. Children hear both messages, so the damage runs in both directions. The child being held up as the example, the good one, The smart one, the easy one, carries that label as a weight, not a gift. They become anxious about living up to it. They stop taking risks because failure would mean falling from the pedestal. Meanwhile, the child on the other side of the comparison, the one who's always falling short, becomes the one who decides to stop trying altogether. If the verdict is already in, why push? Directly comparing your children, such as "why can't you be more like your brother or sister?" and labeling children as the funny one, the smart one, or the quiet one, can promote anger, jealousy, and resentment. The long-term consequences of this pattern can be dramatic. Childhood rivalries between siblings can be revived in adulthood, especially when children must come together to make decisions about aging parents. Those seeds of favoritism planted at the grandparents' kitchen table can grow into estrangements that last decades. Siblings who stop speaking. Family holidays that become logistics problems because certain people can't be in the same room. Those fractures almost always trace back to feelings of not being equally valued. What to say instead? Comment on specific behaviors or efforts without comparison. "I noticed how hard you worked on that," or "you were really kind to your sister just now." That's the difference between a label and an observation. Labels stick to identity. You're the clumsy one. Observations describe a moment. That was tricky, and you kept trying. One tells a child who they are. The other tells them what they did. And children have far more control over what they do than over who they are. Observations give them agency. Labels just give them a box. Comparing your grandkids to their parents, especially in a negative way, can create tension and resentment. Instead, try focusing on their unique traits and qualities by saying you have your own strengths and abilities that make you special. Every child who spends time at their grandparents' house needs to feel like that house is a place where they, exactly as they are the right kind of person. Not the better one, not the worse one, just theirs. That's what grandparents have the power to give, and it costs nothing. This is the one grandparents are least likely to recognize in themselves, because it doesn't feel like criticism. It feels like empathy, like siding with the child, like being the soft landing they need. When their parents seem harsh or unreasonable, the grandchild comes in venting about a rule they think is unfair, and Grandpa nods along and says, "Well, I think they're being a little hard on you, to be honest." Or, more directly, "Don't worry about what your mom said. While you're here, you're under my roof." It feels like love. It might even feel like truth, because sometimes grandparents genuinely do think their adult children are too strict. And that's fine, they can think that. But sharing negative comments about your adult child's parenting choices with your grandkids is not a good idea. If grandparents have a beef with how their child is parenting, they should bring it up to them or keep it to themselves, but leave the grandchildren out of it. Clinical psychologist Ryan Howes said, "Here's why this matters so much more than it might look. Children are not trying to navigate one authority structure at a time. They're navigating the whole family system at once, figuring out who to listen to, who to trust, how to behave across different contexts. And when a grandparent chips away at a parent's authority, they don't just loosen one rule, they loosen the whole structure." This kind of statement may make them question their parents' competence and can be confusing to your grandchildren because they love both you and their parents. That confusion is the cost. The child gets caught in the middle of two adults they love, and suddenly love feels like choosing sides. They might enjoy the temporary permission, the lifted rule, the unchallenged screen time, the snack their parents said no to. But emotionally, they're carrying something heavy. The knowledge that the two camps of their family don't agree, that grandpa thinks mom is wrong, that the world is less stable than it looked this morning. Grandparents are from a different era, and that's fine, but respecting parents is essential. If you have an issue with a child's behavior, talk to parents in private. Around children, grandparents should not shame their parents or their parenting skills because that could lead to misbehavior and bitterness. And the misbehavior piece is real. Children who receive mixed signals from grandparents and parents don't just sit quietly with the confusion. They act on it. They learn to play grandparents against parents, Not because they're manipulative, but because they're doing exactly what any rational person does when they discover an inconsistency. They exploit it. The grandparent who undermines the parent doesn't get a closer relationship with the child in the long run. They get a child who learns to lie and manipulate across family lines. Grandparents who undermine parents need to recognize the damage this causes. If you disagree with how your adult child is parenting, have that conversation privately. In front of the grandchildren, support the parent's decisions even if you don't fully agree. So what do you say instead? You say, "I hear you. That sounds frustrating." And then, crucially, you don't pile on. You don't offer an alternative verdict on the parent's call. You let the child feel heard without handing them ammunition. Then, if you genuinely believe a parenting choice is causing harm, you have that conversation with your adult child. Adult to adult, without the grandchild in earshot. Even if you see what you believe are significant concerns, it's best to take those concerns to the parents instead of the grandchild. The grandparent relationship is at its most powerful when it's an extension of the family, not an escape from it. When grandchildren know that their grandparents and their parents are on the same team, even if that team argues behind closed doors sometimes, they feel safe, they feel held, and that security becomes the foundation of everything else. Their confidence, their relationships, their willingness to ask for help when they need it. The relationship between grandparents and grandchildren is precious. Protecting it means being willing to examine our words, and their impact even when those words come from a place of love. The grandparent who says to a child, "I'll always be here for you, and your mom and dad are doing a great job," that grandparent has given the child something that cannot be taken back. Stability, unanimity, love from all directions. That's the gift. Now, before we go, there's something important to say to every grandparent watching this. If you're a grandparent reading this, you might feel defensive or guilty. Please don't. Parenting advice changes with each generation. What was considered good grandparenting when you were raising your own children may no longer align with current understanding of child development. Every single phrase in this list, the secret keeping, the demanded hugs, the stop crying, the comparisons, the undermining, every one of them was handed down in good faith by people who believed they were doing right. That's the nature of generational patterns. They don't persist because they're cruel. They persist because they feel like love. The grandmother who says big boys don't cry isn't trying to damage her grandson. She's trying to prepare him. The grandfather who says don't tell your mom isn't trying to erode her authority. He's trying to create a memory. But these phrases often come from generational differences in parenting approaches or from not understanding current psychological research on child development. And the moment a grandparent learns what the research actually says, the moment they hear that their offhand comment about a child's weight is being replayed in that child's head years later, or that teaching a child to keep secrets literally makes them more vulnerable to predators, most grandparents don't dig in and defend themselves. They want to change. If you've said some of these phrases, you can change course. Children are resilient, and relationships can be repaired. That's the real message here. This isn't about guilt. It's not about cataloging failures. It's about the fact that you have the power to be a source of unconditional support, emotional safety, and joy in your grandchildren's lives. These small changes in language can make that relationship even stronger. The 5 swaps are simple when you lay them out. Instead of "don't tell mom," check with the parents first, or do the fun thing openly. Instead of "give me a hug," ask, and accept the answer. Instead of "stop crying," sit with the feeling, name it, hold it. Instead of "why can't you be more like your sister?" notice what this child does specifically and name that. And instead of undermining the parents, support their authority out loud and deal with disagreements adult to adult. It's crucial to be mindful of our words around grandkids because they're like sponges, absorbing everything they hear, and that absorbency works both ways. They absorb the damage, yes, but they also absorb the repair. Every time a grandparent chooses a different phrase, asks instead of demands, validates instead of dismisses, supports instead of undermines, the child absorbs that too. They file it away somewhere deep. And when they're grown, and they're sitting across from their own grandchildren, they'll reach for what they